Hello and welcome to tutorialsEU. My name is Yannick and I'm your instructor for today's video. So if you are looking for a cool portfolio application that you want to build, you have come to the right place because we will now cover a very common use case. Today in this video we are going to create a cool bloggish application where you can use the Froala HTML Editor, which allows you to create HTML content and render it in ASP. So we will cover how to implement it, how to read its content, how to create blog articles, and how to even go ahead and edit them to adjust them. You will also learn how to modify the Froala Editor to make a layout that you want to have and to insert the functionalities that you need. So definitely follow along in this video, create your first bloggish application and become a better ASP NET Core developer. So now, grab a cup of coffee or tea and let's get started. Oh, and in case you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and click on that subscribe button because you are a pragmatic programmer and you don't want to miss our nice content which we are just creating for you. So go ahead and click on that. So now click on the link in the description below to get to froala.com so that you can download the HTML editor. Here, on the down left part of the screen, you can see the editor sample. So what do they have here for us? There are a bunch of options to edit the text right inside the window here. For example, we can style it and format it, right? In addition to that, we can also insert images, videos, tables, and even upload files. So you really have a lot of options with that HTML editor here. Awesome. So now let's take a look on how we can use that. Now, scroll down until you can find Try Froala Editor for free. Next up, go ahead and sign up to make use of it for free. After filling out the form, you can click on Download. Now you will get to that page and Froala Editor will start downloading. Now that's great. Click on Get Started. You can follow also the documentation to get started, right? And you can see there are a lot of instructions for specific frameworks, so you can check that, Angular, Aurelia. So a lot of stuff going on here, also WordPress, right? But we will focus now on how you can use this editor in an ASP NET Core MVC template application. So let's get started. Okay, so I just set up an ASP NET Core model view controller application that uses .NET 6 and we are inside Visual Studio 2022 here. Awesome. So now go ahead and open up the project. I simply called it blog. Right click on the blog in the Project Solution Explorer and go ahead, open up in File Explorer so that you come to the root directory. Inside of the www root folder, you can see CSS folder and JavaScript folder. Now open up the downloaded file, which should be an archive, and simply extract the whole archive into a folder. Well, I did that here, right? So now this is everything what we have downloaded. And what we do next is we simply take the CSS content, so from the archive, take everything what's inside the CSS folder and bring it into the main project CSS folder, right? So here we only got site CSS. So I will now take this and simply drag and drop this into our project. So this is the first thing that we have to do. Now go ahead to the JS folder for JavaScript. Also switch in our project JS, exactly the same stuff. Copy everything or just drag it over to our project. Awesome. Okay, so this is what we have to do when it comes to preparation. And now we are ready to use the tool. So let's get started with our creator page. So where a user can create the blog post. Open up the views folder and you can see that we have home here and shared. So we are professionals, so we go ahead and create a new controller and a new views folder. Let's create a new controller first. So right click on controllers and add a new controller. You can simply select MVC controller, empty controller. Let's click on add. Let's give it a name and we for sure have to use the suffix controller. So let's call it blog controller. There we go. Now let's create a new folder inside of the views folder and call the folder blog. Awesome. So inside of that new blog folder, we want to go ahead and add a new view and we simply call that view. We take razor view empty here and we call it creator page, because that's the page where a person can create a new blog article or whatever post type you like using that HTML editor, right? Let's switch over to our controller and connect or create an action which directs us to that create a page, or which returns the view create a page. Let's do this. Here we got public action result index. We can simply adjust that one and call it creator page. We have to name it exactly like our view so that we don't have to provide a different name when we return the view, because if we do it like this, he will check for a view with exactly the same name as the methods or actions name. Great. Save it like this, switch over to the creator page.cshtml. And inside here, we now have to connect the CSS and JavaScript files from the Froala editor. So go ahead and open up the documentation again. Now simply scroll down until you can find these two referencing lines here. Let's copy them over. And let me paste them right here inside of the view, where we have to adjust them. So first of all, those elements here are referencing the CSS and the JavaScript. You can see that they are pointing to a folder called Node Modules, right? Because we copied them over from the Node.js section. However, we don't have that Node Modules folder. So select Node Modules /Froala Editor and replace it. Now you can see it's referencing for the root folder, www.root, right? And then CSS and then Froala Editor, pkgd, so the CSS file. Now we do exactly the same a little bit below in the script tag. For source, you get Froala Editor here. So select Node Modules and Froala Editor, replace it again so that we can go to www.root and then JS folder and then Froala Editor, pkgd, min.js. There we go. Okay, so now we should have that working. So let's create a div for our editor. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Let me create a div. Let's give it an ID. So my editor, for example, inside there, let's create the script. Let's create an editor, var editor, new Froala editor, and simply provide the ID, hashtag my editor. There we go. This is the one that we have used right here. Make sure for IDs to use that, well, hashtag sign. Okay, one last step. So to make the navigation as easy as possible, first of all I save here and then switch to the shared folder on the right side of the screen and go right into the layout folder. So here, if you don't know, you can adjust the navbar and you can find nav elements already inside here, one for home, right, and one for privacy. So we simply replace the privacy one. Go ahead and call it creator page and set the ASP action to be creator page, because that's the name of our action and we are inside of the block controller, right? So block controller creator page action. Great. It's time to start our application. Simply hit Ctrl F5. Let's switch in the nav menu to our creator page. Okay, and now we got the Froala editor here on our page, and that's pretty cool. So I can write down something, for example, hello world, right? I can create lists. tutorialsEU is great, for example, right? You can see everything is working fine. Now, for real use case, you would want to go ahead and put that editor into a form because, well, just imagine you have a blog article site, for example, or just a news site or whatever, and your creator is writing down an article. He now needs to save it, right? So you take the information from the editor and save it to a database, for example, and then on another page, you can render the saved content as HTML again, right? So this is what we want to do. And this is where a lot of people struggle. So we're not only going to implement the Froala editor, as you can see it right here, we now get it to the next level and see how you can grab the content of what you write down, save it, and then re-render it from an HTML string. Let's get started by creating a form. So we will wrap everything around it and then create a submit button. Switch over to your creator page CSHTML. Inside of your My Editor div, go ahead. Let's create a text area. Let's give it a name. Name is for editor content, for example. And the ID is equals to My Editor. Here we go. So this is our text area. Now create the submit button. So simple button, call it submit. Now let's assign a class to style it. It's btn to make, since we're using Bootstrap, to make that a button, right? And then btn secondary, for example, to make the button look gray. Now around the text area and the button, let's wrap a form. So here we got the form, let's configure it, right? So we will just in a second put these into the form, but I want to show you here very blank how you can set up a form. First of all, we assign an action. So which action should get called once you click on submit? We want to call the creator page action, and we use the HTTP method post, because we want to post the information of what we have written down in the editor. Now go ahead and take the text area and button and place it right inside of the form. Something like this. Great, we have the ID 2 times here. Text area ID my editor, right? And we also got that here, div ID my editor. So now let's get rid of the ID from the div here. So div, and we only have one ID my editor here. And the Froala editor will take the text area and turn it into an HTML editor. Awesome. So it looks already very nice, but it will not work like that, right? Because we are missing an important part, and it's the request handling. So let's go into our controller and make some changes. So what should be done here is we need to add one more iAction result for creator page post method. So this is what we want to use from the form here, right? Post method, create a page. This action result should receive a string argument, which is the content from the Froala editor just as HTML string. So let's go ahead and create that method. Create a new iAction result for HTTP post. Public iAction result creator page. So if you don't assign an HTTP method like here, so this one is post, here we don't have one, so this one is HTTP get automatically by default. As I said, the creator page post gets the content from the editor as an HTML string. So write it down here that the creator page has a parameter. Now we will handle the content stuff just in a second. Let's return redirect to action, because we want to go from here after posting something back to the creator page for now. So simply redirect to a creator page. You can write it down like this. So this will now redirect after posting the stuff to the creator page again. I want to test what content we got here. So we can write it to the console or simply go ahead and add a breakpoint. To start the application in debugging mode, simply go ahead and click on the green Run button at the top side of your screen. Now click on Creator Page and let's write down Hello World. Let's make the world bold. So select it and click on bold. Now let's submit the form. You can see the breakpoint started firing, so we are stopping right here. Let's hold the cursor above content. You can see it's set to null. So why is it not working? You know, this is an issue that many developers face. If you check the name from the parameter here, it's called content. Now go back to your creator page. You can see that the name of the text area, so the content of the text area, is set or bound to the name editor content, right? So there's a huge difference. Definitely make sure to always match the name of the HTML element with the parameter name of the attached method. So simply go ahead and call this one here content. Let's save it like this and restart the application. Now, when we're back at our editor and I write down hello world and make that bold again, you can see at content, we got our content right now here as an HTML string. Paragraph tag hello and then strong for bold, world, strong and paragraph end, right? So as I said, the binding from the parameter and the HTML element is very important and a problem that many developers face. So I wanted to show you how you can solve it if this happens to you. Great, so right now you know how to implement an HTML editor and how to grab its content. Now we don't want to implement a real database because the video would be too long, right? We already have enough content on this topic. So let's go ahead and instead of creating a real database, let's simply create something like in memory. Let's simply create a static list of type string and call it posts and write that in capital letters because it's static, equals to new list of type string, right? So just something in memory. This would act like our database. Now let's create an index action result. Let me just copy that one that we have just created for create a page. And let's keep this one here and call it index. Awesome. So in addition to that, we also want to create an index view. So inside of the block folder, create a new view and simply call it index. There we go. Now go back to the controller and we want to show some information at the index page, right? So now that we got our posts, I know right now we don't save anything here, but we will do just in a second. And we want to take all the posts and render them inside of an index page. So simply let's say we want to show the index view and we want to provide some information, some model data here, right? We can simply take the posts, all of the posts. So simply the string list here. Great. Switch over to the index.cs HTML that you have just created because we need to modify the model inside here. Right now there is no model, but we want to for sure have a list of string because that's exactly the type of our list, right? So our post list. Now let's simply render the content here. Div. Inside there we will write down a for each loop. For each string, let's call it post in add model. Here we go. We want to go ahead and create a div with add post. So render the content of the post, which is just a string, right? Let's close the div and we're done. So now we got that first part here covered. Let's switch back to our controller. And in our post method, where we receive the content, we want to go ahead and call our post list dot add. We want to add a new post, which is simply the content here from the HTML editor. Okay, now after adding the content to the post, we want to go ahead and get to the index page, which we have just created. So redirect to action index. There we go. Let's save like this and move to our layout.cs HTML. And instead of going to the home controller index action, we want to go to the block controller index action once we click on home, right? So let's rename home here also to block. Great, so now we have completely switched the system to our own controller. Let's hit Ctrl F5 and take a look at our application. Can you see that we still have that old home page? I will show you just in a second how you can adjust that. But click on block. You can see no content at all. Let's click on create a page. Let's write down hello world again. Let me just make that bold so that we can see that we got some HTML, right? Let's click submit. We should get redirected. And you can see P, hello, strong world, right? So this is HTML, but it's not getting rendered as HTML. It's just plain text in HTML. Okay, so however, we got our content rendered. It's just a single line of code which changes from that HTML string to real HTML markup being visible. So to really render our HTML, go ahead and make use of a helper function. So use add html.raw and provide the post information. So add HTML raw add post. This is all we have to do here. Now, as I said, I want to show you how you can switch your default start homepage. Go to program.cs, scroll a little bit down, and here you can find the default pattern. And we want to show our block index, but it shows our home index. So go ahead and change block to home controller. So controller is equals to block, which will show then our list. Great, so let's take a look, press Ctrl F5 again. If we now go to create a page and write down hello world, for example, let's just set world to bold and submit. You can see once we get to the other page, hello world. Let's write down something else, fruits, for example, let's make a list, apple, banana, blueberry. Let's submit. And you can see we got that rendered here. Great. So I want to go ahead and tell you how you can modify the Froala editor because you are able to really customize what you can see here. Go into the creator page. Here where we create our Froala editor in creator page CSHTML. Let's go into the instantiation, so new Froala editor. Let's go ahead and add a new object here. We can customize. You can check the documentation for this. So toolbar buttons, for example. Those are the buttons that we can see. And now let's go back to the documentation just for a second. And when you scroll down a little bit, you can find examples, API concept and all of this. And when I click on examples, you can see on the right side here, the toolbar. And here we got the toolbar button. So let's take a look on them. and you can see that they have that element here defined, bold, italic, underline, right? And this is everything what we can find here. So bold, italic, underline, exactly this, right? So let's take a look at the second one, toolbar buttons too. And as you can see, it now looks different. And here they have even another option to, well, offer even more stuff. Great. So very, very nice. For paragraph, for example, you can now indent, format, all of this. So if you want to have that, you can simply go ahead, check out the keywords or the names of all those elements and options from the documentation. I will just now copy that over and paste it right here. Toolbar buttons is this, right? Exactly what I've copied. And now take a look. Let's go to the creator page. You can see that it now has completely changed. Great, so this is how you can configure it. So feel free to build whatever HTML editor you need for your application. And I will now focus a little bit more on the styling, but these are just 2 or 3 CSS classes. So inside of index.cs.html, we got that for each loop. Now instead of simply having that div, we will wrap this in a cart. So use bootstrap for this class equals to cart, and inside the cart we have a div, another one, and this one has also a class and it's called cart body. Great, and inside that cart body we will now render our HTML and add some spacing, right? So div class cart and then add an MB2, so some margin between the elements. You can also take a huger margin for sure. Now let's take a look at the application. Great, and now after adding some content, we simply got a list here, and here we got a table. Everything works and looks fine. Now it would be very nice if we could go ahead and edit a post. So once we created one, right, I just did that. And when I go to blog, I can see the hello world entry here. It would be very nice if I would be able to edit it, because that is something that you really want to do in a lot of real world applications, right? You want to create content and you want to change it if it was wrong or if you have to adjust something. So now we take a look on how we can edit a created post. Inside of our application, inside of the models folder that we got right here, right click and add a new C# class. Let's simply call it blog entry. For sure you can also call it article or something like this. So we need 2 properties. One ID, we will take a GUID here, and for sure string content. So write down prop, and as data type we take GUID, globally unique identifier, right? And for my property, let's simply call it ID. Now the next one, simple prop string, and let's call it content. Great, save it like this. This is how a single block entry will now look like. Now go into the index.cs.html. Here we will render a list of string. We will now change that to be list of type block entry, and for that we have to use our new namespace. So add using block.models, and then add model list of type block entry. Great, so now he's complaining because string is not really model anymore, right? So we go ahead and say block entry, can say post in model, and then we want to render at post.content because that's now our string content saved inside that property. Switch over to the creator page and let's just think about what we have to do. We still create the text and we don't have to create an ID right here. But however, for editing, we need to provide a field so that once we want to edit something and then save it, we for sure again provide the ID. Let's first of all create the endpoint and then come back here to the creator page form. So go to the blog controller and here we have the creator page, right? So this is the one which would get called when we want to create a new blog article. Now in the creator page, we can modify that. As a parameter, let's place in here a GUID, let's call it ID. If we don't have an ID, then we are about to create a new post. And if we provide an ID, we should go ahead and use that ID to grab it from our post list. So as you can see right now, our posts are still list of type string. We need to adjust that and also go ahead here and use block.models. Now let's switch over the posts of being a list of type string from to be a list of type block entry. For sure, we have to do that for initialization too. Great. Now, here we have our creator page GUID ID, right? Let's make use of link. So start using system.link. Great. Now, inside of that creator page, we want to go ahead and check if the GUID is empty. You cannot check if a GUID is null. So check if ID equals to GUID.empty. And if we have an empty one, we can simply assume that we are about to create something new. So we should switch it around and check if it's not null. So if it's not null, we want to go ahead and find the correct block article and return it. So ID GUID is not empty. Just write down here block article, for example, or block entry, which is then existing entry equals to, now let me autocomplete that, posts first or default where xid goes to ID. Great. Now, when we have that existing entry right here, we can simply go ahead and return the view creator page, but we will this time paste in a model. So bind it model to existing entry so that we provide the block entry inside there. Great. And in every other case, the GUID is empty. We simply return nothing here, so just an empty view. Now switch to the creator page CSHTML. We don't have a model here, so let's start using one. First of all, make use of block.models so that we can use our block entry. And then we set the add model to be of block entry. Now switch over to the block controller and scroll a little bit down. Here you can see create a page string, right? Post add content. So this doesn't work anymore. We for sure have to build a block entry. So block entry equals to new block entry. This is posting, right? So we create a new block entry and we say entry.content equals to content. So we will have to take care about the ID setting, right? And not always creating a new one, but we will just do that in a second after testing the system. So for now, we simply go ahead and create a new block entry every time instead of, well, updating an existing one. Now let's switch over to our index CSHTML. And now let's add an edit button. So create another div outside of the cart body. And let's give it a class, and the class is equals to cart footer. And inside the cart footer, we will have a button or an action link. Let's make use of a helper function, which is add html.actionLink. Now, first one is the link text, for example, edit. And as a second parameter, we want to provide the name of the action, and we for sure want to call the creator page here and provide the GUID. So take that. You can also go ahead and specify the controller name, but since we're inside of the same controller scope, we don't have to do that now because we are inside of the block controller, sort of, because the index CSHTML is attached to it. And also provide the ID, the GUID. So let's add a new object and set the ID to add post.id. Now switch over to the block controller. Here inside of our creator page HTTPost method, we create a new block entry, but we never set a GUID. So let's create a GUID entry.id and let's assign a new GUID. So GUID.newGUID. Great. Save it like this and start the application. Let's create a simple article. So hello world. Let's make that bold. Press on submit and you can see that edit button appearing here, right? And now when I click on edit, you can see in the URL that we are visiting /creator page/ and then the GUID. So everything here seems to be working fine, but there's no content yet in the editor field. And that's what's up next. Inside of our block controller, you can see that here, inside of the creator page iAction, we submit the block entry from the list, which we are grabbing by ID into the view, right? We're sending it here, bound to the model. Now let's switch over to the creator page where we receive that model, right? Block entry. And now we can use the text area here to display the content. And for this, we will make use of a new keyword. So first of all, we no longer need that name, right? So this one is binding it to the parameter, right? Which is for saving content right here in create a page HTTP post method. Now we can go ahead and remove that, and instead of using name, we can take ASP4. And now we can use, since we now have a model, simply content. So he takes a look, all right, I will bind it to block entry content. And he takes block entry because that's the model. Great, so as I already said, if we are editing something, we always need to make sure that we keep track of the ID, because if we don't do that, our backend logic will think that we will always create something new. So let's go ahead and let's create simple input, and we can hide it just in a second, but for now I will just keep it visible and we bind it to ASP4 ID, so that we now keep track of our GUID. Okay, so this is the first part. Let's switch over to our block controller again, because every time we hit that HTTP post endpoint to save our content, we always create a new block entry. Okay, so now we have to adjust our system so that we also get an ID here, so that we go into our static list to check if we have an entry already existing. And if we have one, we can simply replace the content. Okay, so first of all, this is our code for the new entry. So let's go ahead and rename this one here, rename it to new entry. There we go. Instead of taking a string parameter, we now switch it over to block entry. So our object relational mapper, or RM, will automatically convert the information we got here into a model or into an object of type block entry. We will just see that in a second. Now, new entry content equals to content. Content is not existing anymore. We for sure have to now take entry.content. Great. So first of all, before we do anything else, I just want to go ahead and check if we have the block entry here. So let me just place a breakpoint and run the application in debugging mode. Now let me just create a new blog post. Just write down hello world again, make it bold to check if HTML is working. Let's hit submit, and you can see when we create something new, the breakpoint stopped the application, and we can see entry. We now got an ID, which is 0. This is GUID empty, right? And then we got the hello world HTML string. So this is working fine. We can simply check if the ID is empty. However, let's continue from here. And in the application, let's click edit. And you can see now, okay, we got the GUID here, right? So this is set. We got the content inside here, which is also fine. And now if we submit it, let's check it starts with 9.2. Let's submit again. You can see that we now in the entry have also 9.2, right? So this is the object relational mapper that's taking place here, right? So it takes simply those data elements here and, well, converts them right into a C# object, and that's absolutely amazing. So this is very powerful from the side of ASP. Okay, now let's modify our backend logic so that we, instead of always create a new one, now check if we have a block article with the GUID provided from the entry parameter here. Great, so let's do that. If entry.id equals to GUID.empty. So if we have an empty one, we can simply go ahead and just create a new one, right? So new entry content and then finally set the ID. Let's just place that right here into the if statement. So I really want to make it very clear so that everyone can follow now. So we put that into post, right? So this is for new article. And if entry ID is not GUID empty, that means that we already have an article. So now let's go ahead and grab it. We already got that. Or you can see AI taking place here. Block entry, existing entry goes to first or default ID, where GUID is the one from the parameter. So let's go ahead and accept that because that's right. We got the existing entry. Now we can simply, well, take exactly the same stuff from here. New entry content, right? Can place it inside here, new entry, switch it over to existing entry content equals to entry content. So this is our existing element, and that one is the one received from the parameter if we edited it or changed the content, however. Great, so we don't have to touch the entry ID because, well, once that is set, we don't want to modify it anymore. And in the end, that's all we have to do. Okay, so this should be understandable for everyone, right? So here we got the new article and here we got the existing one. Awesome. So let's go ahead and test this. Let me just create something here. When we submit it and click on edit, now we got the GUID. Let me write down hello world 2. Now let me submit, and that should update our, well, already existing one. Let's create a new one. Let me just write down hi. You can see 2 now. That's awesome. Let me make that bold for editing. Submit again. Works fine. So this is really a logic, a backend logic that you almost ever implement in any ASP application, however, in any web application in general. So we got the main functionality now covered. Let's go ahead and work a little bit on the styling, set up just some HTML elements and then install a custom theme. Great. So in the project, go to the index.cs HTML. If you go into your views folder and then home and then index, we never touched those CS_HTML files. You can see this here. It's taking the view data and inside there defining the title, which is then set to homepage. So let's copy that over and let's just put that into our index.cs HTML where we render our block list. So let me write that down right here. The view data title will now here, for example, be articles or posts or whatever you want to call it, right? I will now call it posts. Great. So this appears in the tab of your browser. And for the creator page, we will also do that right here. We can simply call it create post, for example. Here we got an H5 saying create post. And the button that we have, the submit button, is very, very close to the actual text area. So let's go ahead and add some empty for margin top 4 so that he has definitely more distance to the actual text area of Froala Editor. Now the create post here, I want to add a class 2 equals to margin bottom for example 2, so that we have a lot of distance to the actual div which contains our form. Great, now switch over to the index.cs HTML. We don't have any information yet provided here, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's just write down an H2, for example, and we can simply say articles or posts, say posts again, and afterwards I will just add a small divider. And now finally go to creator page and let's take that input here and set it to hidden, so that we no longer have that appearing in our form. Now go ahead, start the application and check how it looks. Okay, so this is how it looks now. We got a headline, we got a divider. Between those two articles we can have a little bit more distance, that's fine. Now let me switch over to edit. We could also make this, well, a nicer looking button, right? So let me click on edit, but the form here looks great to me. So we have a lot of space between the elements, that's totally fine. Great, so now let's keep in mind what we want to do. We want to add some space between those posts and switch the edit button to look like a real button. Go to the index.cs HTML. And here we got cart margin bottom 2. We can for sure go ahead and increase that and set it to 4. That should be fine. Now here we got the action link, right? And we want to provide some styling here because right now we are not doing it. So let's simply create a new object again. And we can go ahead, can simply write down add class and then set the value, for example, to be btn and btn sm and btn secondary. Save it like this, btn sm for small, right, secondary for gray. Check the application again. Okay, and you can see that this actually looks great. So now we got the button here and a lot of more space between the single posts. Now it's time to switch over the actual theme. Okay, and here we are at Bootswatch, and here we can grab some Bootstrap themes. So let me just go here, click on themes. You can go through all of them. I decided to take Journal, which is actually a very nice fit for our current application. And then I simply go to Journal. Well, actually you can take a look at how the style for sure and the entire template will look like in the end. So let me just scroll up again. I will now click on Journal and then download the Bootstrap min.css. And the download starts immediately, and then we can switch over to our project again. On the right side, inside of your project view, open up the lib. Here you got Bootstrap. And inside of the distributable folder, open up the CSS. And here you got bootstrap.css. Now what I want to do is, I just take that Bootstrap, which we have just downloaded, and put that right into the CSS folder right here. I will now drop it here. Okay, I got that right here now. Scroll down into your shared layout, and here you can find the style sheet. Go into distributable CSS bootstrap min CSS, right? So we now want to change that to CSS and then remove everything afterwards. Just keep the bootstrap min CSS because we got that inside CSS bootstrap min CSS. When you now start your application, make sure to hit Ctrl F5 to clear your local browser cache, just in case you don't see any changes here. If still nothing is appearing differently, make sure to check the path to the bootstrap CSS min file again. You can now see that we have a nicer looking font here, right? So some elements have definitely changed. Very cool. So, and this is the way how you can get rid of that default bootstrap theme that everyone out there is using, right? Okay, so we are done now, and that is how you can create a bloggish web application using the amazing HTML editor provided by Froala. You can find the entire source code of this project in the description below. Now go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it already, because you don't want to miss any ASP.NET content. Thanks for watching and see you next time.